If you've spent any amount of time studying art, then you've probably come across terms like master copy or master study. In art, a master copy is the study and reproduction of another's artwork, typically done painstakingly to perfection. The main objective being that the best artists can be learned from through emulation. In a previous video, I talked about Cezar Brandao's work and how he creates one specific thing exceptionally well. His female portraits are unique to the point where you could immediately recognize his work at a glance. I also mentioned in that video that if you're interested in creating female faces, then he is someone that you should try to emulate. So I did exactly that. My work fell more under the category of master study rather than pixel for pixel copying because I more so wanted to study his style, specifically the forms used in his characters' faces and how he paints his characters. And from this study, I learned two things that I thought would be cool to share here. The first I learned by actually sculpting the character, starting from a sphere all the way to blocking out the major proportions, into refinement where I worked on things like placement and proportions more and more, until finally I arrived at something close to this stage here. This is right before I started painting the character, and it took me about 4 hours or so of referencing a bunch of Cezar's work in an attempt to get something that felt similar to his style, but was still unique enough to be my own. This is the point at which I figured out that this character's face is a great base or starting point for a variety of different characters. If you're familiar with the idea of a base mesh, this is a similar thing but at a more finished level. A base mesh is typically something low poly that you start with to speed up your workflow by already having a lot of the hard work done for you. Things like proportions, landmarks, and clean topology. But what we have here is more of a finished base that we can still use as a starting point for a variety of different faces through manipulating proportions. And then by further changing the individual parts of the face, such as the eyes, nose, and lips, you can pretty quickly get to a new face that feels different enough from the last to be a new character. By changing things like the hair, paint, and giving your character a few accessories or wardrobe change, you have something completely new with a much smaller amount of work than it would have taken to create this from scratch every single time. You do have to be careful here though, because it's easy to end up with same face syndrome, where everything you create looks exactly the same. With a technique like this, it's easy to fall into this rut because you are using the same base to start from each time. And this is why I always encourage people to create things from scratch so that you learn the difficult stuff like proportions and character blockout early on and don't become reliant on things like base meshes later. The second thing I learned from this study was how Cezar uses value and color to draw the viewer in and create faces that feel wistful or maybe even melancholic. There's undeniably something about the face that interests people. Even as children, when you draw that sick person, the most amount of detail always goes into the face. And that's because the face is where expression and character lives, and we are just naturally drawn to character. I'm going to go over some of the key points right now, but if you are interested in learning more about the painting process that I'm about to show, there's a link in the description to a tutorial on how to hand paint eyes and a live real-time demo for hand painting skin. To begin this process, I first loaded in one of Cezar's images to use as a color palette so that I could sample the colors directly in ZBrush. So we have our midnight black, Prussian blue, titanium white, all that good stuff here in just a few clicks. And then it was a matter of building those colors up one layer at a time on top of my model. There are a couple things that make this painting style so unique. One is how dark and shadowed the colors around the eyes get, and this is achieved by hand painting shadows directly on places like the eyeball to help really make them pop. The second is how much contrast is used between light and flushed areas of the face. The front plane of the cheek, bridge of the nose, forehead, and chin are often pale in comparison to the flush areas of the ears, nose, eyelids, and the area around the lips. This helps to give your eye rest during the flat areas and draw more focus to the main features of the face. And then the darkening of the eye cavity also aids in this process quite a bit as well. And the process in total isn't necessarily difficult, I would say, but it does take some trial and error to find that combination of colors that works really well. In total, I only spent maybe 8 hours or so studying Cezar's work. I think there's a lot that we can learn from him, especially when it comes to creating and painting appealing faces. Now, I of course learned a lot more from this study, but these are the two major sticking points that I thought stuck out the most and would be nice to share here. There are many other artists that I would love to do a similar study of in the future, and if you guys enjoyed this video, let me know down in the comments if there are more artists that you think deserve some study time. You can find links to all of the videos I mentioned in the description. You guys have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.